Well, hey everybody, hope you're doing all right. Today's video is a little bit more lighthearted. It's just a thought, an insight that I had recently into sort of how my brain developed throughout my 20s and basically a cognitive dissonance that I see basically all young men have to go through. And this is why I think a lot of them have turned right wing, because this cognitive dissonance is hard to resolve and it actually leads to a secondary cognitive dissonance, which we're also going to get to. So just a quick recap. This is a psychology concept, cognitive dissonance. And as a musician, I know all about dissonance and playing out of tune. Ooh, music joke. Okay. Dissonance is when something doesn't line up well. So a cognitive dissonance is when you have two seemingly contradictory thoughts that could both be true or need some sort of resolve to be wrestled with. So this is kind of where, like, if you're a little bit unsure if your spouse is cheating on you, but you don't want to check, those two things create a cognitive dissonance that has to get resolved with either you checking or infinite pain and suffering, in that example only. So what is this cognitive dissonance? So as I was growing up in a normal sort of middle-class white household, a lot of suburbia across the U.S., baby. I certainly felt like things were normal, if that makes sense. And people would tell me, oh, you have it really good. You have it really good, right? And it's like, from my perspective then, having it good was to kind of have things be normal. And I was disturbed by that. I didn't like the fact, I didn't care for that at all. Especially since it's not like we were like spending money at home or anything. It was just like absolutely having security. You know what I mean? And of course, being able to have music lessons. So it was really kind of this thing that was in the back of my head through my mid-20s, a thought that turned from, well, assuredly there is male privilege, and I don't know about that. Going to do what my parents sort of, say and go to college. And then as that progresses, it's kind of like, yeah, so I guess in this dog-eat-dog world, I might as well at least try to use some of my gosh darned male privilege to at least be successful in life, right? And I think that it really hit me crushingly hard when I was like 27-ish, up on a mountain in Santa Barbara, California, having been years separated from any of my, bourgeois brethren in the musical community abroad, as I'd resolutely stuck to making it out in LA in a car. And I felt terrible, of course, because you're supposed to be able to make it in this country. You're supposed to be able to have merit. I was even told how fortunate my starting position was, and also, as I grew up, how gosh darn smart I was, whatever that means. So why am I living in a car? Why am I living in a car? Now, this on the one hand does demand a sort of explanation. And believe me when I tell you, my resolution to this cognitive dissonance is basically all the political and economic stuff I talk about on this channel. So that is why I feel it so fervently, because it did resolve this for me. But until it does, you might come across some ideas that you're a bit hostile to. Like if people tell you and remind you about the male privilege, but you're not able to yet see the forest for the trees, the Titanic metaphor, where the ship has already mostly sunk. It's just us white dudes are still kind of standing on top of the bow. You get it? So you might hear something that kind of rubs you the wrong way because you're struggling, you've had a tough time, and there is a genuine loneliness epidemic for everybody, and because there have been, if anything, efforts to try to mitigate some of the past horrible awkwardness of availability of community for marginalized people, of course there hasn't been, apart from the traditional ways of having communication with, other white people or whatever, there hasn't necessarily been a special effort attended to that. So, if you have yet to leave your initial starting place in life and start to consider other people's perspectives, it is going to be a pretty raw emotional thing for you, I guess, initially. Unless, well, there is one other explanation that made a ton of sense to me even then, but I do think there's a reason why this one was harder for people. Because again, this is me mid-20s still, but I fully put together, I'm like, if I've struggled this much, and I know how sort of impossibly glass ceiling the entertainment industry is, because especially by now it's so saturated, there's only so many opportunities, and then there's tons of rich people's kids. So how is it not going to be like a Nepo baby environment? You know, that's just fucking commerce, right? So it's like, okay, truly, if I have male privilege, white privilege, American privilege, this is a sign of how shit everybody is having it, surely. And that's kind of the other way to resolve the cognitive dissonance. You can either say, oh, man, no, white guys are oppressed. This is, this is, dog eat dog world. We got to be strong. Blah, 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 blah. Guys are illogical, even though I'm getting emotional about this. Or you can take a sobering second to reflect and maybe catch up to the actual dire state of the world. Now that leads me to the second cognitive dissonance, because I know for a lot of people it's kind of intolerable. This is what kept me being more or less just like a liberal kid. We don't have to get into the politics of that. I mean, not that progressive, still trying to do a normal thing, go to school, whatever, because of course I am. Like that's like the right information. That's the right information. But, it's like you might come across something that makes sense. You might come across a little snippet from communism and you're like, oh, I guess that part's okay or whatever. Right. But you're like, surely that can't be the way. Surely not. But at a certain point, if you're really trying to openly observe the world, I don't think there's any denying it. And whatever words you choose and whatever kind of background you come into looking at it, you start to realize the stacked nature of life. But if you research it, and there's a lot of research out there right now, you also start to learn that there's a lot more information. Like the common narratives we're fed about a lot of things deprive us of necessary information to be able to adequately assess a situation. That's the whole reason why people could be kerfuffled into believing these insane things to begin with. So how do we remove the cognitive dissonance specifically of all this change that might sound nice, seems so far away, so far removed from what we have currently, that is it even something worth fighting for? And I want to remind us of something. I want to picture, you probably don't like slavery now. We've all been raised to not like slavery. And you can easily picture yourself, as you are now, being dropped in 1700 England or New England, and definitely being anti-slavery. But the reality is, if you're trying to fit in with people of that time, you're going to have to put up with slavery. And you probably wouldn't have. So if we like to think of ourselves, and I think a lot of us do, at least sometimes, like to think of ourselves as the types of people who would be able to be strong, now we have an opportunity right now to be that person, to be strong, even if we don't get to see it realized, because of the inevitability of collapse of capitalism, because we can already see even metaphors don't do it justice. There's already hordes of people who are barely conscious in the streets, in cities all the time as a major problem. There is literally sometimes fire raining down in streets and floods, great floods washing away. I mean, come on, guys. This is the stuff that only happens so once in a while that you could write big stories about it and use it to scare the next people, because it isn't just something that they're going to prepare for in their lifetime. They don't know whenever it's going to happen because it's kind of rare, but now it's often. Don't let anybody gaslight you about that. And so what I'll say about the cognitive dissonance and how do we go forward if the change we need is so impossibly far away? Well, we just be clear-headed about it. Don't get yourself in a tussy. Don't try to wrap yourself around whatever institutional liberal thing that you think is going to like slowly incrementalize our way to there. No. Workers own their own labor power and means of production, and we want to have sustainable practices democratically voted for so that we don't all fucking kill ourselves and our children can grow up. Don't take your eyes off the prize, because it's already too late to even stick your head in the sand. Sand's heating up. Sand's getting too hot. But unfortunately, I do think that the cognitive dissonance about, you know, if the world is really so bad, how can I possibly face it? And then being too scared to face it, the only thing you're left with is essentially xenophobic racism. That is essentially my explanation as to what's happened to so many young white men. And maybe that was already obvious to you, but in case it wasn't, or in case you're a white dude who didn't know, that's kind of what I see as the reason. And I hope this video can help somebody as a result. I said this was going to be a lighthearted video, and it totally felt like it was going to be, but then it just got really heavy. I don't know if it's the moment or whatever, but I will say in this video for sure, it's just a thought, but y'all leave yours in the comments below. Have a nice day.